So today we're going to fill out some of the foldables that will go into your notebook. And I handed these out on your desk, and you should just find these. This is the one that is dealing with intercepts. So an intercept is where a line crosses the x or y axis. Now if you have a graph and you're figuring out intercepts, what you can do is you can just identify, remember this one here is the y axis, that's the blue one, and this one here is the green one is the x axis. So where does it cross, where does the line here, where does that line cross the x axis? So if I look at it closely, it's going to be right at this point here. So it's going to be 3 over. So it's going to be 3, 0 is the x-intercept, where it crosses the x-axis. Now the other one I'm looking for is the y-intercept, and that's where it crosses the y-axis. And that's going to end up being 2 up, so it's going to be 0, 2 is going to be the y-intercept. Biggest thing that people get mixed up is the y-intercept is on the y-axis, so x is 0 then. The x-intercept is on the x-axis, so y is 0 then. That's a common misconception. So now let's look at this next part here. Find the x and y intercepts for the line. Where we're going to do that is we're going to plug in 0 for x to figure out the y-intercept, and then 0 for y to figure out the x-intercept. So let's do that. So if I plug in 0 for x, it's going to be this. Then when I solve, the 3 times 0 goes away. It's going to be negative 4. Y is equal to 12. Divide both sides by a negative 4, and you're left with y is equal to negative 3. So the y-intercept is going to be negative 3. So a point on the line is going to be 0, negative 3. Now the x-intercept is going to be when y is equal to 0. So let's do that one here. So here, 3x minus 4 times 0 is equal to 12. So this, the 4 times 0 goes away. You're left with 3x is equal to 12. Divide both sides by 3, and you're left with x is equal to 4. So the x-intercept is going to be 4, 0. So that's all we're going to fill out on this one. So now we're on the slope foldable, and we're looking at example 1 here. This is going to be a positive slope because it's going up when I travel from the left to the right. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to count the amount I go up. In this case here, it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 up, and then the amount I go over, 1, 2. So the slope is going to be 4 over 2, which then we could simplify to just being 2 over 1, or just plain old 2. The one on the right here, example 3, I'm going to do that one now. This one here is a negative slope because I'm going down from left to right. So again, I'm going to count down first, 1, 2, 3, and then I'm going to go over 1, 2. So the slope is going to be negative 3 because it's going down over 2. You're going to leave that as an improper fraction. I know it looks weird, but that's going to be helpful. So for these examples 2 and 4, I'm just going to do that math for you quickly. That's what we've been practicing, change in y over change in x. So I'm just going to write these out quickly for you. So on this first one, it's going to be 2 minus negative 1 over 5 minus 4, so that's a slope of 3 over 1, or just plain 3 if you want to call it that. So in this one here, it's going to be 6 minus negative 4, which equals 10, and then 0 minus 5, which equals negative 5. So it's going to be 10 over negative 5, which is negative 2. We're going to keep the negative on the top, or we're going to move the negative to the top. So it's negative 2 over 1, or just a slope of negative 2. So example 5 up at the top here. This one here, it's not going up at all. So the change in y is going to be 0 from here to here. Change in x in this case is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 0 over 5 is just a slope of 0. And that's what a horizontal line will always have. This one here, the change in x is going to be 0. It doesn't change at all. The change in y goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 over 0, that's that weird thing called undefined. And that's what happens when you have a vertical line. Vertical line because the slope goes straight up and you're dividing by 0, so that just doesn't work. So I'm going to do these two problems down here as well. One of them is going to end up with a 0 slope, one of them is going to end up with an undefined slope. So there we go, the one on the left, you're going to have 0 as the slope because the y values are the same, it doesn't go up or down. The one on the right, you're going to have undefined as the slope because the x value doesn't change at all from the 2 points. So now we're moving on to the last piece we're going to look at today. And this is on the slope-intercept one that's sort of light purple. And if you open up to this page here, it says slope-intercept form. M is going to end up being the slope. B is the y-intercept. What we just covered a few minutes ago was the y-intercept is when x is 0. So the steps of graphing a linear equation is using slope-intercept form. What you're first of all going to do is you have to sometimes put it in slope-intercept form, and that means solve for y. The next step is going to be then figuring out what the y-intercept is and plotting that point. And the final step is to use slope to identify another point. So now we're going to try that with this one here. In this equation, the slope is m, so that's going to be 2/3. The y-intercept is -1, so I'm going to refer to that as b, -1. So that means my first point is going to be right there. 0, -1, because when x is 0 for that equation, y is -1. Now I'm going to use what I know about slope to figure this out. It's a positive slope, that means it's going to go up from left to right. 2/3 means this is going to be my change in x, this is going to be my change in y from a point I've graphed on the line. So my change in y is up 2, so I'm going to go up 2, and then I'm going to go to the right 3. 1, 2, 3. And that there is going to be my next point. And then I can do the same thing again. It's going to be up 2, 1, 2, and over 3, 1, 2, 3. That's the next point on my line. And then I'll make a nice straight line. So in this one here, what you're being asked to do is to identify the slope and the y-intercept and then write down what the equation is going to be. So let's look at this. We already figured out slope a little bit ago based on the previous foldable we used. So we're just going to count over. We're going to go up 2, 1, 2. We're going to go over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that means the slope is 2 over 8, which would actually end up being 1 over 4, simplified. The y-intercept is this point right there. That's down 1, 2, 3. So the y-intercept is -3. So now we've got the things we need to do to fill in the blanks here. We're going to have y is equal to, what's the slope? It's going to be that 1/4 x. and then the y-intercept is minus 3. Similar thing with this one. We're going to count, and the slope for number 1 is positive. It's going up. The slope on the right one for number 2, it's going down. So we should have a negative slope. So we're going to go down 1, 2, 3. So down 3 and then over 1, 2, 3, 4. So my slope is going to be the change in y, which is negative 3, over 4, the change in x. And the y-intercept is this point right here. In this case here, it's going to be 1 as the y-intercept. So the equation for the line is going to be using that y equals mx plus b form. We know the slope is negative 3/4 x, and we know the y-intercept is 1. That's our equation. So I want you to pause here for a minute and then try and figure out the answers to these two using a dry erase board, and then copy down the answers that I'm going to go ahead and write down. So pause here. Okay. So that's the first one, y equals negative 2x plus 4. So y-intercept is 4, and it's going down 2 every time it goes over 1. So the next one, the slope is going to be 2/5, again, up 2 over 5. The y-intercept is 0 because it goes through the origin, 0, 0. So you could write it like this, but this is the shorthand way of writing this because you don't need to show that you added 0. So on these, you're being given the equation, and all you're being asked to do is to identify the y-intercept and the slope. So here, the y-intercept, remember, y equals mx plus b. So the slope here is going to be 3/5. The y-intercept is negative 2. This next one here, it's a slope that goes down again. In this case here, we've got the slope is negative 1/2, and the y-intercept is 3. So if it's already in the right format, which looks like this, it's really easy to identify slope and y-intercept. So for these last two, we're going to plot points. So the first point we're going to plot here is the y-intercept. When x is 0, y is negative 4. So when x is 0, 1, 2. That's going to be my first point. Now it's a slope of 1/3. That means up 1 over 3. So up 1 over 1, 2, 3. So that's my new point. Then again, it's going to be up 1 over 3, 1, 2, 3. Then when I connect those red dots, that's going to be my line. And that makes sense because it's a positive slope. This one on the left, or the one on the right, excuse me, it's again, we already have it in y-intercept form. Remember, you've got to put it in that slope-intercept, y-intercept form. So here, my first point I'm going to plot when x is 0, y is 3. And now it's a slope of negative 5, which means negative 5 over 1. So every time you go over 1, you're going to go down 5. So that's going to be my second point. And I'm not going to be able to graph the next one all that well, but it's over 1 and then down 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. So it would be about right here because I'm going off the graph. Connect the blue dots, you've got your line.